All right. One of my favorite people in restaurant tech, Ben Leventhal. I don't know if I've told you that. You're one of my favorite people in restaurant tech, Ben.
I'm honored. Thank you for that.
Well, part of it is just your background, man. The guy who founded Eater, that's cool. One of my favorite publications in Resi, and then now Blackbird. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you're doing with Blackbird.
Fantastic.
So you have news dropping on July 30th. This is about a week in advance of that. Tell us about what you're announcing.
So what we're going to be announcing is the launch of Blackbird Pay, which is our proprietary payments network. We've been talking from the very start about the importance of giving restaurants tools to bring fees down, to increase the fidelity of the data they get customer to customer. And we strongly believe that pay is a huge part of that equation. And so what we're launching is a payments product that allows restaurants to move funds between restaurants and consumers and restaurants much more cheaply than they can using legacy rails. And for a consumer, we're launching a new interface to pay, and we think it's a huge step forward. From the time you check in using Blackbird, you don't have to take your phone out of your pocket again. Your check gets settled behind the scenes, and you can leave the restaurant whenever you're finished eating.
I was reading through the press release, and one of the things that just jumped out at me that I like is, do you want to split it with your friends? That just seems like such a simple thing. How many times we all go out to eat, and you're putting 5 credit cards down, and the waiter or waitress is just going, "What the hell?" So that all is taken care of in that, which I like.
I think it's incredible that you and I have been in and around technology and restaurants for quite a while now. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of the technology has started to evolve pretty rapidly. But when you think about the form factor around paying, especially in fine dining, it's striking to me that it really hasn't changed in easily a decade, if not more. We still think about the form factor of payments in restaurants is the check presenter and a piece of paper that gets printed and put in there. And then you have to drop these physical things in the check presenter, and you kind of go through this sort of high friction, often frustrating process. I have been thinking about payments and payments technology for quite a while, and I've been struck by the mystery around payments tech and how little it has evolved. So we are certainly excited, hopefully, to be bringing the industry, way forward from where they've been.
I think, during the pandemic, I saw pretty explosive growth of tap to pay at
Yeah.
actual at the table, which was cool. That made things a lot easier, but still, like you said, not a lot of progress beyond that. But I want to step back, and so you can give a little bit of time to explain what exactly all is involved with Blackbird Pay. You have this proprietary puck. You tap in as you check in, so it's both a sense what you're combining, also a loyalty platform with payment, which is interesting as well. So walk us through the whole process.
So, the Blackbird platform is focused on creating connectivity between restaurants and guests, and payments part of that. So fundamentally, with Blackbird, as a consumer, you tap in using one of our NFC pucks, and that creates a connection between you and the restaurant. And pay is the first major thing you can do with that connection since we've launched. We have, of course, been offering rewards and the ability to accrue fly as you check in. But we think with pay, it's a really material upgrade to the experience for consumers and really massively expands what you could do with the platform, what you can do with Fly, our rewards currency, and ultimately, obviously, how that experience is going to start to feel for restaurants and consumers. So as a consumer, you use Blackbird, as I said, to check in. The payments product allows you to continue to use whatever you like to use from a payment standpoint today. We know a lot of people continue to have strong affinity to their credit cards. We are not endeavoring to change that or to adjust that relationship that consumers have with their cards anytime soon, although we think we can create some compelling incentives in the long run. But as a consumer, whatever you have to pay, you continue to use. You'll use it through Blackbird instead of having to bring that credit card out at the table or something like that. And in terms of what Blackbird then facilitates, and this is the core of our network, is we make sure that funds move between the consumer, however they're paying, and to the restaurant and the restaurant gets it out on the other side in their operating checking account, and at a processing fee that's substantially lower than what they're probably paying today.
2%, I think I read, versus the traditional, what, 3.5 to 4?
Well, it obviously depends on card, but
Yeah.
that's the ballpark, yes.
And let's talk about the crypto, the blockchain part of it, and how the consumers interface with that. You're obviously making it very easy to use. That was always from the get-go. You talked about that. No one's downloading a crypto wallet. And what was interesting to me is it sounds like I can then take my fly, dollars or whatever you call them, and then I could potentially use them in a broader sense, just beyond restaurants. So talk about what all this looks like in terms of how people accumulate their fly and how they can spend it.
Yeah. So, as we've talked about before, I think one of the fundamental concepts that you need to think about when you're building on crypto rails is that most of the consumer audience couldn't care less about crypto, and for good reason, because ultimately it's technology and it's infrastructure. So most of the crypto part of our service is abstracted away, and for consumers, hopefully what we're delivering just is, consumer magical product. But what we are using it for behind the scenes is to move funds from consumer wallets to restaurant wallets,
Mm.
and that part of the system is new for us in terms of what we're introducing. And over time, we think that more than anything else is really going to allow us to bring the cost of payments way down for restaurants. So from a technology standpoint, we are using the blockchain to move token from consumer wallets to restaurant wallets. And we're using the blockchain to do it in a secure and scalable way. And to the extent that consumers care about that, or for that matter, restaurants care about that, you can peel back the onion, so to speak, and you can explore how that works on the platform. We're certainly not hiding it. But in terms of the product experience, it's not front and center.
So there's a proprietary NFC puck
Yep.
in a restaurant that opts in. You guys have a pretty good list so far. I saw Momofuku's on there, pretty impressive. A lot of New York centric restaurants, no surprise there. So essentially, are you replacing a POS system? Are you basically, are you going after Clover? Are you going after Toast there? Or what are you basically, or people, is that working alongside those systems?
It's absolutely working alongside. We don't have any ambition whatsoever to compete with POS or reservations for that matter. I think we feel like Blackbird is a net new service.
Hmm.
And if anything, feels like a next generation form of payment versus something that exists today. We know restaurants have operations that are complex and that involve many individuals working on many systems. So we know for sure that we don't want to introduce new complexity and introduce a new system that restaurants have to train up on. So, this is not using Blackbird for a restaurant is not a rip and replace, as they say. Those kinds of sales, Resi was one of them. Those sales are very hard and require restaurants really investing a ton of time in the implementation itself. We don't want to be in that business with Blackbird. We want to make life easy for restaurants. We want to make sure that we don't complicate an already complicated tech stack. So Blackbird is completely is built to integrate with those systems, and implementation for the restaurant is pretty lightweight.
Could one of these other systems start to basically integrate what you do? Why wouldn't Jack Dorsey do that for Block or something like that? Why aren't they doing this?
The nature of startups and the nature of competition is that they might. We feel like we have some pretty important insights, and we have a really exciting path of execution in front of us. If a POS company or a reservations company decides they want to pivot and start focusing on what we are, that's one of the things you think about as you're building a startup from scratch. But you got to believe, as we certainly do, that we're going to out execute anyone who tries to do this alongside us.
Okay, tell me about the pitch. You go into a restaurant, they're using just traditional point of sale, and you go to the owner, the chef, whoever that is, and say, "Hey, I want to put Blackbird in here." And you say it's this new form. What's the pitch, and how do you make this palatable for them and not make not make them think this is overly complicated?
Essentially, we pitch it as a new form of payment that they should consider accepting Blackbird as they do other things like credit cards. And for consumers, it's a seamless and frictionless way to pay. And for restaurants, along with lower fees, you get a much higher fidelity data set about your customers.
Okay. I'm impressed with you guys continuing and forging this path. You guys are coming out with new ways to serve the customers. You guys are definitely dedicated to the blockchain. It seems like a lot of the blockchain guys, like from 2 years ago, have all pivoted. Now they put their AI companies on their pitch decks now. I haven't noticed that from you guys yet.
No, we still strongly believe in blockchain and in what the technology can deliver. When we talked about it a couple of years ago, I think one of the things that I said was that this is going to be a long play. I mean, we're going to see the technology evolve. We don't believe in some of the more near term or flash in the pan upsides that we've seen with crypto. We believe in it as infrastructure and technology, and that it is going to unlock things for us on an ongoing basis and on a long-term basis. And I do think that's exactly the path that we're on. And I think that Blackbird Pay is the first material example of something that we're doing on chain that, frankly, I don't think we could do it in a legacy technology setting, and we certainly couldn't do it at the speed that we've built it and at the scale that we built it.
I would consider you somewhat of a futurist. I mean, you're always looking at how things are changing. You, I think, have a pretty good crystal ball for restaurant and food service. What are you excited about over the next couple of years and how restaurants changing? We're kind of a decade into this food delivery revolution. I'm seeing some interesting stuff on that front, like Andrew Simmons and his Lucille platform for food delivery. What are you seeing in terms of changing in the ecosystem around just restaurants in general, around payment, around delivery, et cetera?
I think I see a couple things that are exciting. First of all, restaurants from a format standpoint finally seem to be loosening up a little bit. I think, we've sort of had these very traditional ideas about what restaurants are, QSR, FSR, and what it means to be one of those kinds of restaurants. And it seems to me that finally things are loosening up in that regard, and that entrepreneurs are thinking about new formats and new ideas. Certainly, one example are these micro menu establishments where they're serving one or two things, but they're doing those things incredibly well and they have lines out the door. So I think that's really exciting. I also see, as we interact with restaurants, obviously we interact with dozens on a daily basis, not hundreds on a daily basis. I think that we're finding that restaurants are finally starting to understand that they have a little bit more leverage than they thought when it comes to negotiating and when it comes to essentially using their brand as a value driver, as a revenue driver. Now, obviously, every restaurant doesn't have this luxury, but I think restaurants that have a brand that stands out are starting to get savvy to the power of that brand. And I see it in how they're thinking about monetizing, how they're thinking about negotiating, the leverage that they're starting to get with, frankly, companies like Blackbird. I think it's really exciting. I think that to me signals that we're evolving as an industry, and some of the sort of imbalance of power and some of the leverage dynamics, which for so long have plagued the industry, are starting to shift a little bit. In terms of technology, as I said, the evolution is definitely happening. I think the systems are getting more sophisticated. I think I'm still disappointed about how disjointed they are from a connectivity standpoint. The data still sits all over the place and in these kind of weird and unconnected data sets. And obviously that's sort of, in our crosshairs right now, something that Blackbird is thinking about very, very, intensely. And we're very focused on fixing that problem. But I think you could look at the industry today and you could say, there is a lot of progress that we've seen, and maybe it's not quite showing up yet in the bottom line of the average restaurant, but it feels to me that we are out on the other side of some pretty gnarly times, and the industry is getting more savvy in ways that are going to set up a very bright future.
All right. Well, Ben, as always, I enjoy talking to you, and this has been a fun conversation. And I always like you hear your thoughts on the future. Thanks, man.
All right, you got it.